morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Sandy Bottom Homestead. It's a fantastic day outside, and excuse me, I'm getting over a cold, so you got to work with me here. It's this is one of the subjects that's just overly complicated in the garden, and I understand why. And so I'm going to talk about fertilizer. I'm going to give you an example, and then I'm going to take you around and show you for the warm season what we've got in the garden now, and kind of explain to you what we're going to use and how we're going to use it. For the garden right now, the crops we're going to be focused on at this exact moment are going to be the squashes, the tomatoes, and then the peppers. Now within those, I need to add to that, there is cucumbers here. There will be green beans there, hopefully. And those are what's in the garden right now. As we add more crops to our garden, we'll basically amend, no pun intended, this this discussion. And I'll go over this with you guys because it is definitely confusing, and it makes sense while it's confusing. And the reason why it's confusing is mostly just because there's so many options. It's incredible. But I came across a conversation on a radio the other day, and it was basically a gentleman who was like, hey, I've got a soil test and I've got the results, and this is what I want to add. Definitely recommend getting soil tests in your garden. And just a note on soil tests before we go any deeper. If I was to get a soil test for my garden, I would get a separate test for each bed. For this, that's the way I would do it, because they're all basically broken up and I can treat each one as normal. Last time I got one, I didn't label them quite right, so I ended up just mixing it together. But I would label them, you know, bed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and then amend as needed for it. And because these beds are so small, you're not really putting in a lot of amendments into the bed. So it's not really overly, you know, expensive or anything like that to do it that way. But that way I can manage each one appropriately, because each one will have different, I mean, you know, this bed right here, yeah, this one was the first bed I had. So it's a lot older, and this is this year. So they're going to have two totally different deficiencies and overages and all that stuff. Generally, when you get a soil test, it's going to come back and it's going to say, hey, you need to add nitrogen. And that's because, as we've said before, nitrogen is water soluble, so it'll wash out of your garden, but other nutrients aren't. So back to the original, and I'm going to play you the answer that I really, really liked. But he was going over some different things, you know, he's adding, you know, like, he was asking us, should he just add like 20, 0, 0, you know, 30, 0, 0, this, that, and the other. And a guy comes back and he goes, well, hey, what are you using your garden on? He's like, it's just a vegetable garden. And so this was his answer. I find it on my phone, so here you go.
Well, in that vegetable garden, Mike, I tell you, I'd just go with some 10-10-10. If you go and put a bunch of nitrogen in it, you're going to get a whole lot of plant growth, but you don't have anything to support the vegetables and the roots.
And that is sage-old advice, and it's something that we need to really think about, is if you start adding a certain nutrient into your garden that is higher than the others, you can throw it all out of whack. You know, if you add too much, okay, so let's just talk about this squash right here. If I add a bunch of pure nitrogen here, let's say I come in here and I just add a bunch of blood meal in here. I think it's 1400, which means it is nothing but nitrogen. All I'm going to get off of this plant is going to be leaves, because that's what it's going to produce. And what's not going to be helped is underneath. We're not going to get the roots to support the plants. And that is an issue. So you can see here that we're actually doing something right, because we have flowers. So you don't want to just add nothing but nitrogen to it, or nothing but potassium or phosphorus or anything like that, because it does cause an issue and it will throw your garden out of whack. And so that's where the advice of just add some 10-10-10. just don't overcomplicate it, man, especially this time of year. Add the basics in and call it good if you have to. It's okay. We want to overcomplicate things, and we shouldn't have to. We shouldn't go into the store and see 58 different things, and they're all marketed different. We just did a episode on the Backyard Gardens podcast where we openly talked about the marketing of fertilizers, and it wasn't labeled that way. I can't remember the title of it, but anyways, if you're a listener, you find it. If not, sorry. You should definitely check it out. But not knowing what the numbers mean and just going by the marketing is going to cost you a lot of money, and it's also a good weak point where you could fail. So that leads me to my garden, and I'm going to start over here with my maters. And you know, it's getting time to feed them again. We're getting very close because the plants, as you can see, they're starting to get bigger. I ran out of tomato cages. I've got to get more, which pisses me off. I hate these things, but they just work. But we're going to add mulch soon, so we want to put another granular fertilizer down, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to put a well-balanced fertilizer down here. That's it. So that one, I believe, is like an 8. I think it's like almost like an 8-10-10 or something like that. It's a little bit lower on the nitrogen. So if I want to off balance that, I could always throw a little bit of nitrogen in there, but I'm not going to do that this time of year because I want this plant to focus on making fruit. So I don't need a lot of nitrogen. Now, the other thing I'll do is I will come in and in the drip system, I will shoot some, I think it's 5-4-3. And that works pretty good because that'll give it an initial boost. Like as soon as you hit it, it's gonna get a boost. And so we're gonna give it that. And then the same is really gonna go here for the squash. I may put just a little bit of blood meal in because I like to get just a little bit more leaves to get it strong, because these are determinate tomatoes. They will grow and they will quit. These squashes, we want to maximize as much growth as possible before we get the squash vine borer so we can get as much fruit. So we'll probably do a little bit of nitrogen in there, and that may, instead of doing blood meal, I may just do an extra, like a watering can with the liquid fertilizer on there. And that may be about it. And then if we come over here, well, actually, before we go over to the peppers, let me tell you about the spring garden and just comparison. The spring plants here, like this bed, for instance, we put, and by the way, this is gonna be chicken food, just so y'all know. It got really hot the other day and things just went crazy. So we're gonna harvest all of our lettuce this weekend and then just kind of empty that out. So that'll all be gone, hopefully within the next video or two. But what we would do here is we would do the same well-balanced fertilizer, the same injection into it, but then we also will put in the blood meal, which is a 1400. Same here, 1400. Now this one, for the onions, we do a little bit different. We put in, we inject it, and then we also do multiple treatments for the onions of 1400 up until the time of bulbing. Then we stop. So these are finishing out at the point, so we're not feeding them at all. So when I inject the system this week, what I will do is, or today actually, I will turn this bed off and it will not get anything from it. The potatoes, we give them an initial fertilizer treatment and then we stop. And then after that, they just get the normal well-balanced fertilizer. Now, because of that, I can put in, they make specific potato fertilizers, but you can use other nutrients because it's creating roots. And you can use, I believe, potassium. So like a bone meal you could add in. I don't typically do that. It's hit or miss. If I do, it's at planting. But as of this point, it's just getting the injection and then the overall granular fertilizer. And that's it. And so I try to keep it pretty simple. I don't have multiple bags of different nutrients. I don't usually go get anything specialized at all. That's not really my gig. I'm not really trying to do that. And so for the peppers, what we do about the same thing. Peppers are a little bit different in my mind because they're a longer growing season. Sorry, my nose itched if it sounded weird. So what I like to do with the peppers is I like to feed them a little bit extra nitrogen just to get this green growth up. But then it's important to stop and then let it create the roots that it needs and give it that well-balanced fertilizer. So we put in, at planting, I put in a little bit of blood meal to give it an initial boost, but then I stop and then I just go straight up granular fertilizer, well-balanced, and then the injections. And you have to remember, when I'm using this injection, it's a well-balanced fertilizer. It's in the grand scheme of things, like I believe I said it was like a 5-4-3. Actually, I have the bottle over here. I'll look at the numbers so I can talk educated about it, which I wouldn't open this bottle. This one's old and it's starting to puff up. It might be look how it's puffed up. Let's see here. This is a 3-3-2. So it's very balanced, very, very balanced. It's got almost equal parts. That 3 and 2, that's basically a balance. What you're looking for if you want something that's like heavy would be, and so the numbers don't really matter. As far as like a relation, like a 1-0-0 is just about like a 14-0-0. But if you look at that and it's a 3-3-2, let's say it was a 15-3-3, then that would be a higher nitrogen. Like it wouldn't be considered well balanced, is what I'm saying. So that's a good general purpose is what we want, because that's generally safe for your garden. Now, when you look at the garden and you're growing it, there's just something you need to know to get through to the garden and get nitrogen and fertilizer going. And basically what that is you need to know what the 3 numbers are, the 3 letters, the N, the P, the K, and what they do. And I did a video where I explained that. And once you figure that out, all of this marketing stuff that you see, all of the different, garden, or like overall garden fertilizer, tomato fertilizer. You don't need all of like tomato fertilizer and potato fertilizer and pepper fertilizer. You don't need that. What you need to know is what your N, your P, and your K mean, the levels, and you're good to go. So I don't know about you, but when I grow my garden, I want it to be as simple as possible. And I know that I needed to feed it, and I don't want to overcomplicate it. And just remember, like the gentleman said, just put some 10-10-10 on it, because then you're going to get well-balanced roots, well-balanced leaves, a well-balanced produce. You're good to go.
Goodbye.